there was a time when we were fighting actual laws and actions. Again, when there were rules that forbid you from entering a school that your taxes help pay for, that's not a feeling. That's not, oh, I didn't feel like I couldn't go to that school. You actually couldn't. You didn't feel like you couldn't drink out of that water fountain. There were laws forbidding you from doing it. You didn't feel like, oh, I got to sit in the back of the bus. You actually had to do it, and we were fighting actions. Slavery was an action, it wasn't a feeling.
Right.
How did we get here that feelings are the most important thing in America, and we have to make sure that no one's feelings are ever violated?
That's a great question. I could answer it on a couple different levels, right? The examples you gave about the issues that we had to address and overcome, particularly, earlier in our country's history and up through the civil rights era, issues that were actually systemic in nature, right? There were actually laws in the books that said black folk couldn't do certain things. At that time, we needed Judge Judy, right? We needed to get laws overturned. We needed a better policy and so on and so forth. But now this society needs Dr. Phil. And the problem is, at a certain point, people stop caring about your feelings. They have other things to do. They have families to raise. They have their own problems to deal with. And the tolerance for other people's feelings, particularly as they become more and more ridiculous, to be quite frank, and as society gets softer and softer and more fragile, including men, by the way, the tolerance for taking on other people's emotional and mental burdens as your own is just going to get lower and lower and lower. And that's unfortunate. That's where we find ourselves today. Our society is not, our people, the citizenry is not built the way it used to be. When the aggressions 50 years ago were very macro. Everyone could see them. But now, if someone who's new to your office happens to call you by the wrong name or mispronounce your name or misspell your name, now that's an issue that has to go to HR, and there has to be reconciliation, and this, as I said, our society is just getting soft. So I would say that's on a cultural level, but on a deeper level, particularly on a more spiritual level, our society and much of the West, I would say, has been completely unhitched from the notion of absolute truth. And as a Christian, I base my absolute truth in the unchanging, eternal truth of God's word found in the scriptures. So those are truths that I can anchor into, and even if someone doesn't agree with them, they'll know what I'm anchored into. But once you pull up the anchor, once you pull up everything that keeps you tethered to a particular place, you'll just drift and you'll just get pushed to and fro. And typically it's by whatever society thinks is normal at a particular point. And I think we're seeing that in our society, and it's really it's really based on whatever the majority says. So we'll go back to the issue we're talking about, right? For some reason, and I'll use I'll use a reference that a lot of people may know. I remember when the woman named Rachel Dolezal came out and said that she was black. She has been the head of the NAACP. I want to say it was in Seattle for a number of years. She taught I believe she taught at HBCU. She convinced everyone she was a light-skinned black woman. But it came to find out she was a white woman. But she said she felt black. And she was ridiculed for the most part. And you've actually seen a number of people sort of take on this same thing where they pose as black, for a particular reason and a particular period of time. Now we laugh at her and we say she's being ridiculous. But if she came out tomorrow and said that she's Richard Dolezal, then we would all say, oh, I affirm you. I believe that, it's possible to change your gender, but not your race. So we take something which actually is a social construct, which is quite fluid in terms of what we call race. A person who may identify as black today or be identified as black today, 50 years ago, 75 years ago in a different region would have been called Creole, or mixed or octoroon or quadroon, whatever it is. And we take what is fluid and we make it fixed. And we take what was fixed, which is sex, gender. A woman today would be a woman 70 years ago, 175 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and we make it totally fluid.